next user. So thank you again, Alan. I really appreciate that.
Okay, so the topic of today's webinar is model-based engineering and how we prepare the engineering items for modification and ultimately release to manufacturing, and what we do with those on the manufacturing side. So I'm going to walk through the presentation and kick off the demo, but I've brought in Ian back from the previous webinar. He's actually from our portfolio team in charge of a lot of the define on these things. So we brought in the expert here to help walk everyone through all of this. Now, in case you haven't seen the previous webinars, I like to just connect all this together in context. And here, 3D Experience Platform that has a number of roles and applications supporting users across the enterprise. And what we've been focusing on in this webinar series is to provide a gateway of this next generation model-based world into that for file-based users of file-based CAD and connect them as a gateway into that. So previous webinars have shown a lot of that in a lot more detail. What we want to focus on now is discovering how manufacturing and engineering can leverage all this great work in the model-based environment, regardless of the CAD it came from. So again, the idea is to connect the file-based world into the platform. Once connected, to be able to reveal that intellectual property, generally as engineering items that can then be consumed by other applications that you can discover across the platform, regardless of where you started. And that's really this whole approach here with the PLM collaboration services that we've been working on. Now, the applications that are available that we've walked through on other webinars is business innovation is a role that every single platform user gets. And you get things like the dashboard, 3D Play, being able to do searching, connection to communities that you can share socially and comment and look at ideas and so on. There's a whole bunch of apps that you get access to just for being on the platform. We've been also talking about industry innovation, which starts to begin a little bit more of the PLM side, where you're going to do revision management and tracking, being able to explore products in 3D, dealing with tasks and sharing tasks with everyone. We've shown a lot of that in previous webinars. Being able to do 3D comparisons, we've shown that, and actually going to show that again in an upcoming webinar. But then ultimately, connecting that CAD, file-based CAD, CATIA V5. SolidWorks as well. We haven't shown that yet because we're focusing on CATIA V5 in this series at the moment. And that's through a role called 3D Component Designer. Revealing that intellectual property, we've shown some of that, and you can see that revealing in some of the apps in industry innovation, so the comparison, the product exploration, and so on. And then being able to discover new model-based applications on top of that. And this is really where we're going to focus today to see product release engineer as well as manufactured items manager. And we're going to have a scenario that will take a little bit of this, so you can see that again and how that comes in and then is leveraged over here. So that's something I think it's important to note also, that this is Innovia and this is Delmia. And that's okay, because when you're on the platform and you're model-based, it doesn't matter. These are different capabilities for different types of users, but it's leveraging the same data model, the same information, and we'll show you how that all works together. So before I begin with the demonstration, I want to put also a little bit of context in what we mean by model-based engineering. So traditional bill of material type of enterprise top-down management, there are companies that do this. It's enterprise-driven. You know, you're dealing with items, part numbers, and everything you need to do to actually go and procure those items. On the other side, you have the design, or CAD, product structure, where the designers are focusing on what is the product structure, how is it fitting together, and everything there from a CAD perspective. And these are traditionally two different worlds, and every system works this way. You deal with CAD and deal with CAD files and manage those files and relationships, and you deal with bills of material and things like that, and guess what? There's a wall there, and there needs to be some sharing of information. There needs to be transferring of ownership, who does what and when, and that requires syncing mechanisms to make sure that things are updated, and you change management and so on. And we do this very well, by the way, in Innovia. In fact, we do this and produce phenomenal productivity gains for customers by allowing them to bridge this gap very nicely. And the way that works is when you have the traditional approach, you have your various, let's call it PDM, management of the files, whether it be file-based CAD or next generation CAD with 3D Experience CATIA, or things like software or electrical, ECAD, and being able to manage all these things with their respective connectors, with their respective tools that are needed to manage and release those particular designs. When you want to integrate these things together, what do? You synchronize those into a bill of material, an engineering bill of material, and we have a role for that called product engineer. And again, this works. A lot of our customers, we've got all the change management tying all this together, and this has been a very successful way to work. And there's nothing wrong with doing this. In fact, this is the way that you would initially start to deploy. Deal with your CAD, various CADs, start dealing with your engineering management of your bills of material, and so on. So why are we looking at a model-based way? What's different? What does that bring? Why would you need it? Well, if we think about this title here, which is a bit of a mouthful, but companies now want to be business-driven. They want to drive knowledge through the enterprise. They want to have multiple disciplines working together, co-engineering. Okay, so that's a bit of a mouthful there. But when you think about the way things work today, it's not that. Today, we have an enterprise system with its hierarchies. We have a typical iterative approach to learn and then revise and continue and do that. We have all of this happening in their own respective silos as part of their enterprise organization. And it's very sequential to do your design, test, validate, produce, check that it's working, and do it over again, do it over again. And those cycle times can, depending on the products, could be years. And, all of this is labor intensive. That's why even if we enhance this a little bit, if we give you a 20% productivity gain here, it's a massive gain. So certainly there's an advantage there. But in today's economy and the way the world is working, with experience driven and the speed by which things are happening and the innovations, we need to speed this up even more than just a simple productivity gain. What is needed now is taking advantage of the value network, not just the people in your own enterprise, but the experts that you can bring in as you need them. You need to be able to drive the business in real time, not because you did an iteration and you've checked it, the result, but as you are working, you revise on the fly and track that to the business objective. Being able to integrate everything together in a multidisciplinary way. Why? Because to deliver an experience, you need the product. A lot of times you need software and electronics to make all that work. So how do you work everyone together towards that common end, driving the business, driving external value network people? That idea is then this DevOps concept, which is much more software-like, where you have incremental improvements as you go to adapt and adjust quickly as you need, versus a multi-month, multi-year approach where once you've made some decisions early on, maybe you can't go back and you've lost that agility. This, what we call DevOps, or continuous product development, is an important consideration. And finally, being able to drive all of that, have machine learning and knowledge to track what's going on, to provide recommendations to the users in real time so that they can take advantage of previous know-how, and they don't always have to be the super experts all the time to make the right decisions. Now, these types of things start to drive some value in the organization. So when you have a value network, what you're really talking about is connecting with anyone that you need to within your network of internal and external partners. So you're getting the best set of skills when you need them. You don't always have to do it in-house, and the traditional sourcing and things like that can be significantly revamped and improved. Of course, having the business analytic gives you that real-life monitoring, real-life optimization, and compliance against the business objective. Having that multidiscipline, there's no more integration required. There's no more, hey, let's review all this and have these design reviews and, oh, you should have changed this, and finger pointing and trying to get everyone together. No, you do that as part of the business, and you're seeing everyone's input in real time. Of course, DevOps, continuous product development, you're going to have much more velocity, much more agility. You're going to be more confident in what you're doing in terms of meeting the market and so on. And if you can have some of this knowledge being consistently applied through what we call cobots, being able to provide guidance, to provide structure, you're optimizing the work of your people, and you're making sure that everyone's following more common procedure and leveraging the best practice that you have developed over the years of what you're doing. So throw all this in this bucket here called multidiscipline engineering. And this is bringing a connection to the enterprise process, as you saw. It's not just another silo. It's a grouping, but it's a connected grouping to the business objective. with all the measurements needed of that in real time to provide all the analytics and guidance to the management as well as to the user themselves to provide all that level of detail without requiring export analysis and expert analysis. The flexibility, as we mentioned, through DevOps, being able to adjust as you go, supporting configuration, and all of that automated or partially automated or reduction of complexity through machine learning and automation. And all of that, easy to use, mobile, anywhere, anytime, anything you need. This is the drive to change from a traditional siloed, product structure versus BOM structure into one which is multidiscipline. So we take model-based approach. And what a model-based approach means is you think about a model. What is a model? I'm not talking a 3D model, though a 3D model is a way to represent something real and do it digitally. Why would you do that? Well, a model, whether it's a model of 3D, whether it's a model of a sales process, whether it's a model of a manufacturing process, whatever it might be, you do that to facilitate understanding of what it is you're modeling. I make a model, right? And I can look at that model and I can make changes to that model and see what's going on. I can do that to help me make some decisions. What if I did that? What if I did this? What did the model do? How did it change? And so on. And that also then helps to predict what might happen should you decide to make some changes. And of course, if you can do all that digitally, now you can be model-based in many different parts of your business. So it's not just a 3D model-based, but it's the 3D, it's the engineering management, it's the bill of material management now, which is more of an activity that you do, manufacturing, process management, and so on, all doing that digitally. It's a full digitalization, so you understand the behaviors, thanks to the model that you have. Communication of business intent, communication of the experience that you want for those different models tied in is important. Being able to drive up quality because people have a better understanding of what's happening thanks to the model. And productivity because you can bring in all kinds of additional digital help onto that digital model to support and make sure you have a desired outcome, which really improves confidence in what you've done. So model-based is not just a euphemism or a thing, but actually it's going to drive phenomenal transformation in your business. So we take the traditional approach here. What does it look like when you go model-based? We don't really need to have all these different silos and PDMs of different files and synchronizing and so on. What we do is bring it together into one whole system that we call the engineering item. And it's holistic because it supports many, many things. It's not just a CAD or CAD A versus CAD B. It's also the bill of material, and it's also everything that you need to do to extend and leverage that for that engineering item. So, what is it? Okay, holistic engineering, which includes the various CADs that you saw on the previous slide, software, electronics, ECAD, documents, everything that defines the product. That's an engineering item. How we implement that in the 3D Experience platform is through something called a physical product. Now, if you're familiar with the 3D Experience platform, that's the traditional icon that we use, which looks very much like a CAD assembly. But don't let that fool you. This is not really just CAD. You don't need CAD for an engineering item. Of course, if you have CAD, you can plug it in, as you've seen with the PLM collaboration services, but it's not required. And in fact, this object supports the CAD, the documents, the configurations, everything that's needed to support whatever model you need to work on that. So the engineering item can contain, as I mentioned, of course, the 3D. It can contain all the various attributes that are needed to drive that. It can contain the other engineering items and references and relationships to other engineering items. Things like drawings and documents and whatever, again, as you need to define that. And ultimately, you might have one engineering item for the drone, but that drone is now referencing many other engineering items inside. And this is very much like a bill of material, but this is a live model that's connected to everything here. It's not synchronizing with all these different objects everywhere. This is one engineering item. And this is the transformation, because when you have one item, you don't have to integrate, you don't have to synchronize, you don't have to deal with all kinds of crazy processes to connect everything. It's all connected here. So when we look at this here, so here's our 3D Experience platform where we have the business and industry innovation, as we mentioned. And here we have our engineering items, or the list of those things that make up your product. This is what we call physical definition of your product. Okay? It's the virtual digital view of what it is you're producing. And as we have seen before with PLM collaboration services, this is where we can connect the various 3D parts of the product into those engineering items. And there's two ways to experience that. One, through native apps, depending on what you need to do to that engineering item. There's various native apps that help you deal with that and work with it. And as you've seen in other webinars, we can also interact with these engineering items through a web interface. So depending on the user, depending on the need, depending on where you are and when you need to do things, you have choices here by the roles and apps for those users to interact with those engineering items. There is no synchronization. This is the same engineering item being leveraged and utilized in different applications. You can also enrich and extend the engineering items through things like model-based CATIA 3D experience. So regardless of where your MCAD might have started from, you can bring that into a model-based world and do extended things like functional generative shape design, like electronic design or cabling, being able to do all those things on top of whatever CAD you had. We're doing multi-CAD design work in here as well, without trying to do importing or any type of migration or anything. You just keep your CAD as is, and then you can extend it here. By the way, this also works equally for Simulia. If you need to do some multidiscipline simulation and you didn't start in CATIA 3D experience, not a problem. You bring those in as engineering items, those engineering items get consumed over here, and Simulia can do its thing, regardless of how you started. So that's really the engineering items, and we've shown some videos and some webinars and demonstration scenarios around how we can leverage that. But there's a lot more to get to that engineering item, isn't there? Well, there's things like, well, what customer requirements are driving this? What is the functional architecture that's needed to support those things? How does that tie into a logical definition or architecture and the system that's connecting all these things? And there's a lot of stuff we can do here around systems engineering that we haven't even touched upon yet. That is a huge value of understanding and modeling the experience and validating that. We also need to produce the engineering item. And this is where we can have the MBOM, if you will, or we talk about the manufactured items and how we build out those structures and deal with that, which, by the way, just like you can with engineering items, manufacturing items can be experienced two ways. You've got model-based way, using a native client, and Delmia's got some amazing capabilities here for those users that need to leverage the 3D in a very innovative way. And they have introduced the same type of thing, but doing that on the web and being able to have a more fast way to do that. This is what we're going to be showing you today. We've shown this on the cloud webinar. Here we're introduce this today. That's about the manufactured product. It's setting it up for manufacture. But then, of course, there's the process planning and how you might do that and what's coming first, how you're organizing that, what are the routings of operations, what are the work instructions supporting that, and keeping all that, again, model-based. And then whatever resources are being used to produce, the robots, the plant, the different workers and expertise and so on. This is all the manufacturing world of Delmia that is, again, model-based, that is extended through the engineering items. And all of that can be driven by a common configuration engine, a common change management system, and project management to support execution. And that's really important because if a requirement changes, what does that impact? And how do you verify that that particular requirement has been accounted for inside of a manufacturing item, or maybe a change to resource, maybe you had to change the system design, whatever it might be, we have, because it's all in the same system, it's all the same data, it's the same model, it's very easy now to manage those changes and notify the people where they can just connect those items directly into their apps and do what they need to do. There's no synchronization needed and different integration of silos and so on. Everything is there. Everyone has visibility into what they need. And then on top of this, because it's all now here, we can drive some very interesting analytics and KPI monitoring, which you're going to see later this year and next year and so on. Some really advanced stuff. For the demonstration purposes, though, today, we're going to focus here, and that's Innovia, and then we're going to show you how we can leverage that into Delmia with a change helping to connect and coordinate that. So what you're going to see, if you go back to this diagram here, is how we will connect with a component designer, with project release engineer, and then bring that over into manufacturing with the manufactured items manager. So this particular scenario, is going to involve a couple of roles that we haven't shown you before. The first one is called Product Release Engineer. This role here, you can read that, web-based. As we mentioned, there's two ways to view an engineering item. This one is web-based, working with the engineering items, to define them if they're new, to reuse if they exist, and everywhere from early stage to final validation and release. So everywhere across the life cycle, this particular role can be used. All right, it's available on-prem, it's available on cloud, it works on mobile devices because of its web and it's widgetized, and the apps included is this engineering release, and you see here the little arrow that means it's a widget that you can put anywhere on your dashboard. And what you're going to see is the ease of access. You're going to watch when Naeem demonstrates this, the ability to navigate, to access what you need, to deal with the engineering items, to define, to reuse, to release, and how all that is organized to help the engineering manager or the release engineer or bill of material manager to really get these engineering items prepared for release. The other role that you're going to see, this is a Delmia role. We're not going to do a deep dive on this role. We're going to do a very, very scratching of the surface here. And this is basically web-based MBOM. We're going to take the engineering items and leverage those into that. There's a whole scenario we can do here that we're going to get in with working on with Delmia later on. But right now, we just want to introduce the fact that when you're model-based, it's very easy to consume this on the Delmia side. And again, it's on-prem, it's on cloud, not yet, soon. And again, being web-based, it'll support mobile devices. And it has one app here, which is Manufactured Items Management. And again, it's a widget. You can see that little icon there. Works on the web. And it does a ton of stuff, but generally speaking, it's lightweight, so it's very efficient. You can create the manufactured items from scratch, so you can design them. You can start with MBOM and just do that. You can leverage your engineering items and allocate those as you need to. And they can have templates that help drive the structure that you want for your manufacturing structure. You can also reorganize the structure, which will show you that, complete and update what you want. You can also do make, buy, alternate substitutes, things you would need to do to get your product ready for production. And then, of course, you can pull that into process planning and work instructions and so on. So this is just the very beginning of having the right manufacturing organization of items so that all those manufacturing activities can occur. So we're going to have three roles going through this demonstration scenario. So Naeem, he's going to be we'll call him the engineering manager. Now, your organization may call it something else. It could be an architect, it could be an engineering, a product engineer, it could be a bill of material items manager, whatever it is. Basically, it's someone who's in charge of defining the next generation of the product that you're then going to have the designers go work on. So Naeem is going to use, obviously, business and industry innovation, as well as this new product release engineer that we're going to show you. He's going to work on his dashboard, and you're going to see that new app, as well as change action to set everything in motion. I'm going to play two different designers. I'm going to play a CATIA V5 designer, and I'm also going to be a 3D Experience CATIA designer. So again, everything will be dashboard-based with a change action. I'll use Product Structure Editor so I can see what's going on, and work under changes, and then one case launch CATIA V5, another case launch 3D Experience CATIA. So you'll see those roles in action. And then also I'll play the manufacturing engineer role, again on a dashboard with the Delmia manufacturing items management role. So those are the people. Now the data that we're working on that you're going to see in this demonstration is this suspension. And in this suspension, we're going to do a couple things. Number one, this is an existing suspension, and the design needs to be carried over and supporting a new design. So we want to duplicate this into a new design, but not everything is going to be duplicated. So for example, this component here is not to be duplicated, but we want to revise it. So there's going to be a change action that's going to modify the color. That'll be a CATIA V5 change. And the brake caliper needs to be adjusted per a requirement of increasing the thickness to support some new design that we're doing on here. That'll be done in 3D Experience CATIA, again, driven through a change action. So that's the two changes that we're going to do. The scenario as it's going to play out on the storyboard will be like this. So number one, so we'll color code. Naeem will be the engineering guy. He's going to be orange. The design will be me in blue, and when we get to the manufacturing, I'll do that, but I'll change my hat and put on a yellow hat. And we're going to do this over 6 steps. The first step, Naeem's going to start off, and he's going to give you a little tour of the interface a little bit, and he's going to show you how we can take top-level root product structure and then being able to define what he wants to do, duplicate things, and set all that up. He's then going to go in and create some change actions and push the work that he wants to do into motion. I'll receive that as the design engineer, once it's CATIA V5, once it's 3D Experience CATIA, make those modifications through the change action, give that back to Naeem, who's going to review and validate those, and ultimately release those things for downstream consumption. Then I'll come back in and just show you a very, very brief introduction of the new Delmia role and how that works. So with that, I'm going to have Naeem come in and begin that particular scenario on how he's going to build that session.
Okay, so as release engineer, I'm going to log into the dashboard. We're going to navigate and see what is the content of the new widget. And the first thing I see here is the list of all the engineering items I'm responsible for. I can have different ways to view them, either in a tile view or in a list view. And eventually, since this is a very big list, I can refine the list using the tags here on the right side. In my case, I'm interested in one root node, which will give me this product, which I'm going to work on. That will be the suspension front model. So we have organized this widget. As you can see, we have the change actions here. We have the 3D play. So when I drag and drop the root node, I can see it in 3D. I can visualize it here. There are different ways to see it in motion. And I can investigate a little bit of this 3D view, and then go back to my widget to start looking and navigating into this flat structure of engineering items. So as we can see here, we can also review the responsible users on these different engineering items using a color code from the 6W tags. So every user will have his own items colored by specific color. I can find data directly by using the find search, Google type of search, directly from within the list. And I can always get back here and drag and drop and visualize the engineering item directly in my 3D play. Again, I'm not a designer, so I don't have to have any CAD application installed just for the sake of 3D visualization of the engineering item. So we can have a look here at the menu. I can review the information, which gives me all kind of information attributes. For example, if there is a part number here, what is the CAD application where this engineering item has been or is going to be authorized. I can also group this list of flat components by instance view. So this way I can see the quantity of each instance from within the structure in case I'm interested in this kind of view. I have also a maturity view in order to focus on specific type of data, released items, and I can always review the impacts by going through the Relational Explorer and see what other type of data available here. So there is a way also to have a multi-update in one click, so I can make multi-selection of my data and I can update it immediately. Now I'm going to duplicate and generate a new engineering definition. As we can see here, I can make a decision which engineering items will be reused, which ones I will keep as is, and which ones will be duplicated. So all the decision will be done here in this easy view, in this tool, where I can make such decisions on the fly. And eventually, and I can define also what will be the prefix that will be created for the new engineering items. And once the new duplicated engineering definition has been created, I can search for it. And here it is. It's available now. And I can start defining which of these engineering items will be part of engineering change, which ones I'm going to modify probably manually. And what is important also is to make the decision here who's going to be owning those components, those engineering items, in terms of the designers and those engineers. So I do this through a change ownership. And I can set also a part number, and that will be the part number that will be available later on in the ERP system. And once it is available, I can see it here directly in the attribute, directly on the engineering item. I can also attach external files directly from the desktop. And when I want to visualize them, I can always download the file, or I can drag it if I want and drop it into the 3D plate. So in this case, we are downloading this PDF file, and you can see as this file, it's a requirement list of for the specific component, and it's part of the engineering definition here. So I can I can make a multi-selection here and quickly modify the ownership. So I can handle the ownership to a single user for different engineering items in one shot. In this case, we are handling this to engineering design number 1. So I don't have to do this one by one. I can make multi-selection and I can change ownership quickly. The same I can do that for attributes update. I can update the same attribute or multiple attributes for various engineering items in one click. So this way, all the work around the engineering definition becomes much easier. Now, within the Version Explorer, I can see the history of revisions. You can see here we have different revisions which have different maturity states. This way I can see what happened to the engineering item in the past. And by that, I have finished the navigation on this new widget. So now we're going to review the next step. As part of this scenario, now that we have the new engineering definition, we are now going to define the change actions, and that will help us to deliver the work, in fact, to the right designers. In this case, there will be 2 change actions, as Garth explained earlier. One will be for the CATIA V5 designer, the other one will be for the CATIA 3D Experience designer. So back to my engineering definition here. So I can create a new change action directly from within the same dashboard. As you can see, I define a description and due date. And then I need to assign the users who are responsible for this modification as members of the change action here. So I'm defining myself as the reviewer. I'm going to review the design work of the user who's going to be assigned here. And in this case, it's going to be Design Engineer 2. He's going to be responsible for this design modification. And I'm going to propose to modify this component by this designer. So I add it as proposed changes, and I explain exactly to the user what I'm expecting from him to do, going through the definition of these proposed changes here, and we can define, for example, the reason of change here. So in this case, I'm explaining that he needs to follow the requirements of the customer. And then I define also referentials. In this case, that would be the requirement document that we have attached earlier. And in the context, I define the full root node, the suspension model here, to explain to the designer that he is working within the context of that specific product. So I promote to in work, and then a new revision will be created automatically by the change action. I do the same to the second change action, because I'm also going to modify another engineering item with a different CAD application. The same we define in the team the user who's going to be assigned. In this case, I'm going to be the reviewer, and the new designer will be assigned here, and he's going to be designer 001 that will be responsible for the CAD modification. And in the proposed changes, I'm also taking the relevant engineering item, I'm adding it to the proposed changes by simply dragging and dropping it here. And that will be the anti roll bar. So this will be modified in CATIA V5. And I explain to the designer what needs to be done. So the color in this case needs to be modified. And again, the same as in the previous change action, we are adding to the referential this requirement document, and we are adding to the context the front suspension model to explain to the designer that this work is being done within the context of that specific suspension module. and then I promote it to in work, which will generate automatically a new revision of the proposed changes in the realized changes, which will be ready for work. Now what is left to do right now is to assign ownership of the new revision to these designers. So there is one step to go further. I need to do this under the work of the relevant change action. So I pick up the change action here, and then I change the ownership of the new revision that was created automatically by the change order to the relevant designer. And I do that through the life cycle here, change ownership. Then I pick up from the list the right designer who's going to be responsible, again, and owning the work of the design modification. So I'm picking up the first designer. Again, there is a comment here. I can explain why I'm delivering this work to the designer, to that specific designer. From that moment on, the designer can access the CAD application and he can start working on this new revision that he owns. And I repeat that for the other designer, and it's going to be the CATIA 3D Experience designer in that case. And again, all of this must be done under the work of under that the relevant change action. So we have two change actions, and this time I'm going to switch to the other change action. And I'm giving the ownership of the new revision that was created by that specific change action to the designer who's going to be the owner of the new revision. And again, I'm using the same change ownership for this new caliper revision, and I'm selecting the right designer here to be the owner of this. And by that, I have completed the definition of both change actions, and at this moment, the designers can start working in parallel on these two different engineering items in the relevant CAD application. Okay, so I'm going to handle this to Garth, who's going to make work on the multiple discipline component design. He was going to be working with CATIA V5 as well as with CATIA V6 as two different designers. And eventually I'm going to review the work that is done, and if everything is okay, I'm going to approve, and automatically the change action will release these two new revisions that have been just created by the change action.
All right, so thanks, Naeem. So now, as the designer, I don't know what he's done here, right? You guys know what he's done. I haven't seen it. He's done something here. So here's me. Let's start off here first as I'll start off as the CATIA V5 designer. So I'm going to log in. That's designer 001, and this is my dashboard now on the platform that I'm going to access and see what's going on. And I can see I got a change action widget on here, and I can browse this change action here on the anti-roll bar that's been assigned to me, and I can see some information. I can see what he's asking me to do. I can see, oh, there was A.1 that was released that he wants to make a change on, change it green. There's the spec and the full suspension for me to use if I need to. And there's the B.1 that was created that I can work on. I can drag and drop, and look, there it is. That's the part I need to change. And here's the information. And in order to make that change, I got to work under that change action because I need to authorize. This change action is authorizing me to make this change. So do the work under, and then CATIA V5, and it launches it, it opens it to CATIA V5, and you can see here the information right inside of CATIA V5 if I can't remember what I was supposed to do. In this case, it's a very simple change. We're just going to make this a quick scenario. I'm just going to go in and change the color. You know, we're PLM guys, not design guys, but you get the point. I'm making a change, whatever that change might be. In this case, change the color, hit save. This will save it back, and you'll see it's saving under that change action, under the authority. Everything I just did was recorded by that change action, and then we'll save that in back to the platform. Now, back on the platform, back on my dashboard, I just hit refresh, and it's going to show me the revised engineering item, which obviously has a revised color. And then I can go ahead and promote that to frozen because my design is done. And then I need to go into my change and say, I'm done this, put it in approval. Right? You can see the engineering item understands it's CATIA V5 master. In approval, that'll then send it back to Naeem, and he can do his thing and double check that I used the right color green that the requirement said. So that's the V5 scenario. Let's move on to the CATIA 3D Experience scenario. So here, I'm designer 2, log in. Now this designer could have an entirely different dashboard. In this case, we kept it the same, but it could obviously be different. These widgets, you can move whatever you like. But here now is the caliper change action, and we got the information that Naeem set up. And this is very important for digital continuity because I have not talked to Naeem. I don't need to talk to him. He gave me everything I need. I don't even have to search for this stuff. It's coming to me on my dashboard. And again, I've got all the information that he's provided. I don't have to go searching for it. It's all there. Thank you, Naeem. And here's the E.1 that was created by the change action that I now have ownership on to make the change. So drag and drop, either there. In this case, I drag it to here. There's the caliper. Okay? It's a product. It's a CATIA 3D Experience product. And I need to go in and make some design change here and add a stiffener onto that side of the caliper per the requirement. So in this case, I'm going to launch CATIA 3D Experience. So here I am in CATIA 3D Experience. This is model-based CAD. There's no files. I didn't have to download anything. This is the advantage of a next-generation CAD. And here I'm going to do the work under this way. I'm going to click on that, work under it. Now everything I do here is being tracked. First thing I'm going to do is I've got to add a new part. I've got to create a part. The change action is recording the fact that I just created a part. And this part is then going to be added to the change action because this little recorder here is tracking what I'm doing. So just some basic CATIA stuff. We're going to project in some curves into the sketch plane. We're going to close them off so we can build this part, kind of tie it to this. Pretty simple, basic part design stuff. We're going to go in and define the direction for that pad, and we're going to make it more of a thickness here, so we'll have a little bit of a hollowed out piece in the middle. Pretty basic stuff. So we just created a brand new part. That part has been added to the assembly. It's related to the assembly, so we've done all the design work. And now we're going to save that back to the platform, which will save the new part, its position, as well as update the product to reflect the fact that we have a new part here in the product tree. And of course, we can do life cycling right here in CATIA 3D Experience just by changing what the toolbar is. And then we have access to the life cycle toolbar. We can do the promote to frozen. So now we've frozen the design. We go back to our dashboard. We're done with the change action. But you know what? If we take a look at this change action, oh, by the way, we hit a refresh. There it is. Engineering item is updated. Okay, it's an engineering item. You don't have to synchronize or do anything. And here I've just gone ahead and put it to in approval. But you can see that it added the brand new part that I made inside of CATIA 3D Experience, as well as the E.1 that was originally created on the product for me to revise. So those things are now complete. The change action recorded that. I didn't have to add this part to it. The change action did that for me. Thank you very much, change action. That's why we have this system to make my life easier as a designer. And now my work is done, and I will pass it back to Naeem. And what Naeem is going to do is then he's going to, in one step, focus on this. There you
go. Okay, so I'm going to review now the work that was done by the both designers, and I need to make a decision whether to approve or to reject. And again, I don't need to have any CAD installed. I'm going to do everything directly from within the platform, directly from within the web widgets. So I log into the platform, and I go directly into my 3D dashboard where I have everything organized. And I can see here on this side all the change actions which are still under my authority. And I review the realized changes. I can see the history of what was done in terms of life cycle, in terms of adding or removing maybe new components. Visually, I can visualize this in the 3D play. I can see this is exactly what we requested, a color change to green from this specific change that was done, in this case, in the CATIA V5. And for the second change action, again, I can review also what happened, what was done by the CATIA 3D designer and 3D experience designer, and I can visualize those modifications in the 3D play. And I can see this is exactly what was requested originally in the change action. Now, I go back to my original front suspension model, and I decide to replace the old revisions with the new ones because the new ones have been approved. So now I have up-to-date structure, engineering definition, and once we refresh, we can see exactly the new revisions available here. And again, in 3D, we can see those modifications available here. So this is the green color that has been modified for this roll bar, and I can see that the thickness has been modified here. So everything seems to be okay. All I need to do now is using the thumbnail in order to approve the change action and define a comment. And by doing that, the change action is complete. So I repeat this for the second change action. I approve it using the thumbnail, I define a comment, and the change actions, both of them will be complete, which will lead to releasing the realized changes. That's the new revisions that have been generated originally by the change action. So again, what is left to do in the complete engineering definition is to continue releasing. So here I'm showing that I can do this manually. Previously, we've done it through a change action, which was a formal release process, and now I can do this manually directly from within my widget. And it's an easy way to organize the list of engineering items according to the lifecycle state, because I want to focus now only on what is not released. That would be the engineering items which are either in work or in a frozen state. And I can use the lifecycle capabilities in order to release everything directly from their current state into the final lifecycle state, which is going to be released. And the same I do for the document. That was the original document that we have attached, and we can use, again, its own lifecycle process to promote it to frozen and eventually release it again manually, or if we want, we can use also the formal change action to do that. So by that, we have completed the release process of this engineering definition. And the next step will be to take this engineering definition and to deliver it to someone else through an Excel report. So I can generate an Excel report out of this engineering definition, and if I want, I can send it to somebody who probably may not have access probably to the platform, or is not aware of how the platform works, so I can send it by email directly from my Excel sheet, and to give him or her some quick view of this engineering definition, again in an Excel format. Okay, now once this is done, I will handle it now to Garth in order to start working on the manufacturing definition while consuming this released engineering definition that was done earlier.
All right. Thank you, Naeem. And notice that the export that Naeem did at the end to Excel, the Excel is basically now just an output. It's a report. You're not doing things in Excel and changing things. You're doing it all on the platform, and then you can produce whatever reporting that you need for whatever other purpose. But in this case, we want to continue the model-based into manufacturing and do this part in the platform. So I'm now putting on my manufacturing hat. So I'll stop saying Innovia here. Maybe I should say Delmia here. I'll give my Delmia friends a shout out and show you a brand new role that they've created for this web-based capability called manufactured items management. So let's take a look at now how this particular user can leverage the engineering items into manufacturing. So of course, we'll log in as the manufacturing engineer, and that dashboard has the new app, the widget here. And in this case, we're not doing any formal lifecycle change management. We're just grabbing that engineering definition. Of course, this could be driven by a change procedure, but in this case, to keep it simple, we're just showing there it is. That's everything we just worked on. The engineering item is there. And now on the manufacturing side, we got to create manufacturing bill of material. This is basically the engineering product definition with engineering items, and now we need to make a manufacturing definition. We get one click, we'll create the manufacturing root node. Now you can manually drag and drop these things or have templates of what you want. In this case, one click, we're just going to copy everything over. It's not really a copy, it's not a synchronize, it's an allocation. This manufacturing item is now related to that manufacturing item, and they're connected, and there's ways to track what's being changed and adjusted and so on. It's beyond the scope of this particular demo, but what I did want to show you is that once you have this structure as a manufacturing engineer, now you can manipulate this for manufacturing purposes. You can create sub-assemblies, you can create kits and so on. So here we're going to create a subassembly that works for manufacturing. There's nothing to do with the product structure. It's not going to impact the engineering structure. This is for manufacturing purposes. And we're going to switch the view here into a grid view and show how easy it is to reorganize and create your various manufacturing bill of material nodes just by kind of dragging and dropping what you need for whatever the purpose is that you need. Okay? So this is very web-based. I could do this mobile device. It's all in the browser. Very, very quick in order to do this. Let's go here. I'll create a manufacturing kit. Okay. Whatever else you need that has nothing to do, and there's no necessarily 3D behind it, it's not related to the product architecture. This is for manufacturing purposes that can then be consumed in process plans and work instructions and so on. So there you see it's been restructured in this tree view. Of course, you can continue on. There's lots of other information here that gets provided so that as engineering items change, you can check and see if they've been allocated into this manufacturing view. There's a whole scenario around change that we will show you later on in the change management deep dive. We did do a change management scenario here in the native app. If you go back and watch the cloud webinar, you'll see how that works in the native app if you're interested in how we have this digital continuity and model-based from model-based engineering to model-based manufacturing. So that's the scenario, and that's just a very quick tease on this brand new role and application that Delmia has created. There's lots more coming on this. We're working on those scenarios right now. But that's how you saw. You saw Naeem come in using this new role of the release engineering role to go in and define what it is that he wanted to reuse, set up the duplication that he wanted, set up the revisions that he wanted, set the changes in motion, and then do his review and approve and consumption of that in 100% model-based way, 100% web-based, except for the CAD changes that we did in CATIA V5 and 3D Experience CATIA. So that's what we saw, right? We saw the engineering items, which is Innovia stuff, and manufacturing. We saw a very brief introduction of that, and we did a change management scenario, at least for the initial creation. And you will see later on in a future webinar on the change management deep dive how we will integrate that a little bit more in depth here. So as the engineering items change, you can then accommodate that change into the manufacturing definition. So that's important if we just, very, very sliver of the demonstration. You know, you can get into further information for systems engineering tied to requirements, what we call RFLP, right? All that sort of stuff. You've got all the way into process planning, work instructions, and virtual factory and so on for 3D Experience Twin. You can support configuration management and how you can create that 150% view of the engineering and 150% view of the manufacturing definition and how those configurations can be supported and so on. Obviously, change is a common change mechanism across all of these things. So if a requirement changes, that change may need to be addressed in one or more places. So the change engine, the change management system supports all that. Now, Naeem showed the simplified change action, but the change action can be rolled into change orders and change requests and so on, and we'll cover that in the change management session because there's a huge piece there. All that can be managed and orchestrated through visible governance with project management. And ultimately, this is all model-based. We didn't have some other system managing requirements, some other system managing systems engineering, some other system managing CAD, another one managing ECAD, another one managing software, another one managing bills of materials, another thing doing manufacturing bombs and process plants. It's all the same system. So there's no integration work needed. There's no synchronizing going on and all kinds of things. It's a common data model. It's a model-based system on 3D Experience. This has been a massive transformation in architecture that you can take advantage of to also then massively transform and digitalize your business wherever it makes sense for you, right? You can do everything, but you can start here and start to move to the adjacent pieces and continue to expand what you're doing model-based. Now, the other webinar series that we've had focused on some of the CAD-related elements